just a little background on me and Zara. Zara, we were introduced to her by Scott Steindorf because they had worked on a film together called Understanding Autism. And we were encouraged to invite her to the Autism and Entertainment Conference last year, where she actually ran a panel and spoke with some of our younger talent, Danny Bowman and Alex Estrella, during the conference. And in getting to know Zara, I learned that she's also a professor teaching about a focus on autistic women. So I asked her to run our discussion group, and I thought it would be really interesting for us to hear what her findings are and what her thoughts are on a woman's journey with autism. So without any further ado, Zara.
Well, thank you so much. My name is Zhara Astra. I'm a writer, I'm a film producer, a professor, a mother, and I am autistic, which is as big of a surprise to me as it is to most other people, because I didn't discover this until I was about 35 years old, which means that I spent 35 years feeling like an alien in this world trying to pass for a human, and apparently doing a pretty good job of it because no one noticed. Not my teachers, therapists, doctors, my parents, not even me. I found out in my 30s after years of asking myself, why does everything feel like it takes more effort for me? Why do I struggle so much just to be okay? Why do I experience the world so much more intensely than everyone around me? And just everything, sensory overload and smells and fabrics and the way that I ate my food. And it was obvious to everyone that I was just doing things differently, but we didn't know why. She's just, she's quirky, she's weird, she's eccentric, um, whatever it was. And then one day, I found out the word that made everything click, and it was autism. And when I finally came out of the spectrum closet, I was met with the most disappointing phrase of all, which many of you have probably also heard in the Asperger Society, which is, "You don't look autistic." So cool. I'm sorry to disappoint. Thank you. Let me go put on my autism real quick and perform for you guys. Or should I have a meltdown and flap my hands and throw my dino nuggets at you guys, right? Because people tend to cling to these stereotypes that they've been fed in society by doctors and film and media. Um, so I met with that. But you're not autistic, you're too social. But you make eye contact. You're not a savant like Rain Man, which a lot of people, especially maybe in, older generations, they base what they know on autism on what they saw in the first film about it, which was that. You're not smart enough to be autistic. You're just anxious, you're emotional. You just want attention, you're just too much, you're difficult, you're dramatic, whatever. Um, but the thing is, I'm not the only one who feels this way. It turns out there are likely millions of undiagnosed girls and women in the world right now that also feel like aliens from another planet, isolated in their own world, right? Feeling flawed or damaged, depressed, or just different. So, we're here tonight to talk about this very specific kind of autism, the kind that hides in plain sight, the kind that leads a little girl to be labeled as gifted or sensitive or too much, or for me, she's just difficult and dramatic. The kind of autism that gets misdiagnosed, overlooked, or misunderstood entirely. And we're talking about autistic women and girls, the rare birds is which I call them. Because I call autistic females rare birds because when I got my diagnosis, I got angry. I got angry uh, upon discovering that the DSM did away with all of the subtypes, like even Asperger's doesn't technically exist anymore, and they left us all in the dust. I think that's a huge disservice to autism and the autistic population in general. So um, I created a subtype for females called rara avis syndrome, which means a rare bird, or rare or exceptional human, because I think that's what autistic women and girls are. Um, so I've been on a mission to try to get this picked up globally. And I'm working on a project with Simon Baron Cohen, and getting it picked up in the DSM is a challenge, but what we're learning as autistic people is that when we don't have the accommodations or the tools that we need, we kind of just make them up for ourselves or our children, right? We do what we have to do. We improvise. So I'll just say this really clearly, though, autism in women, girls, it doesn't look like what most people expect, because the system that defines it wasn't built for us or even with us in mind. So we're not failed versions of autistic boys. We're not broken. We're just these rare birds. And today we're going to talk about how we fly, how we shine, how we operate in the world. The good, the bad, the ugly, the differences, the challenges, all of that stuff. And we'll save some room at the end to if you guys want to ask some questions, or even throughout it, I might stop periodically. Um, I tend to talk kind of fast, so I'll probably through this way quicker than I anticipated. But I want to start today with the diagnostic failure. Why? Why is it different? Why is it overlooked? Why aren't we really talking about this in mainstream society and mainstream, psychiatry, right? Why do we miss the girls? Why do ones like me and so many others go their whole lives until they're in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s even? I know a woman that's almost 70 years old and just got diagnosed. Why is this happening to us? So we have to start with the root of the problem there, which is the diagnostic failure. So what most of us know, today about autism is that we see that it's shaped in primarily that, we know it was termed by Eugene Bleuler in 1908, but it's primarily shaped what we know about it from the 1940s, one of the darkest chapters in modern history, by Leo Kanner and Hans Asperger, who was in Nazi-occupied Austria at the time. So what did they have in common? Well, they built their theories on a very narrow and a very male sample, right? White, verbal boys, often high IQs. The ideal research subject in this kind of deeply patriarchal, ableist system, right? Um, so they defined the term really in Infantile Autism, 1943. And I'll just touch on this briefly because I think it's all related to all these years later why we are so behind with where we are, right? So they describe these children as socially withdrawn, emotionally cold. Um, I mean, a lot of us are incredibly emotional. We just might not present it in a way that everyone else does. But so they label it socially withdrawn, emotionally cold, obsessively interested in objects and routines. And this is where we get kind of those classic signs of the lining up the trains, lining up the toys, spinning plates, or literal thinking, not having a lot of interest in other people, kind of the stereotypical stemming, things like that. And that became the template for what autism is supposed to look like. And if you didn't match that template, well, you didn't get diagnosed. You got overlooked or misdiagnosed. Now, while Leo Kanner was publishing in America, Asperger's was writing about children with what he called autistic psychopathy. His case studies featured only boys, most of which were highly intelligent, rigid, logical, socially awkward, obsessed with their narrow interests. And he described them as like little professors. But but this is, I mean, and this is why we have, the term Asperger's today, because it was a little different than the other version of it. And Asperger's was actively collaborating with the Nazi regime at the time, which, whether by choice or force for his own survival, I don't know, we don't know. But his work under the Third Reich, under this program, was determining whether the children were like fit to live, right? Whether they were seen valuable and or disposable. And that is awful and disgusting, and also why we kind of try to steer away from the whole like high functioning and low functioning terms. And I know we say profoundly autistic now for somebody that has more support needs, and we've failed to have a different term for like the high functioning. They took away Asperger's. What do we call ourselves? I don't know. But that's what he was doing. He was separating them, right? But between the two of them, point being is that it was male case studies or eugenics-driven bias. And the total erasure of anyone who didn't fit in the mold of what they perceived autism was, which left out a lot of females. And so for decades, girls like me, like so many of us, went undiagnosed because we didn't line up toys. We weren't necessarily completely socially isolated. We played pretend, played make-believe, we played house. Um, we didn't overcompensate in the same ways. We didn't stem in public or in ways that was viewed as stemming, right? So we might have stem. You see a little girl twirling her hair. She's on her tippy toes. She's spinning around in circles. You know, these are like female attributes. They weren't necessarily seen as stemming. Or for me, I click my teeth, which is not an observable stemming trait. Or I might pop my knuckles, and I might do it down low so you can't see it. Um, so we're just stemming in different ways, right? We might smile and, you know, and be more performative than an autistic male might be able to. And that is what, you know, autism is based on. But there was somebody in the 1920s, way before this, 2 decades earlier, who was already describing autism in detail, and she was using very female descriptions, actually. And I don't know if you guys have heard of her, but it was Grunya Sakhareva. And she was this Jewish Soviet child psychiatrist in Moscow, and she published a paper on this. And I mean, she saw it. She said she listed these traits out, and because she was a, you know, Jewish female doctor in the time, in Moscow, you know, she wasn't taken as seriously. But I think she's interesting to bring up because she described more nuanced, kind of humanizing, more inclusive descriptions of autism that I think would have included a lot of females to be diagnosed had, you know, Asperger's and Leo Connor included her research and her work in this. Because she talked about sensory sensitivities with light and sound and touch, and she talked about emotional depth, which I have seen so deeply in not just myself and my autistic son, but in so many other autistic people, just the depth there. She talked about motor clumsiness, overexcitability, the narrow but passionate interests, yes, social withdrawal, literal thinking, rigid routines, and even kind of a spiky intelligence there with this profound emotional depth. Um, but she talked about these things that were just a little different than the other two, a little more inclusive. She talked about the empathy, the struggles, the strength, um, and that these children could thrive. She had a little more of an optimistic view on autism. And she talked about, you know, what a lot would have been a lot of autistic girls today, especially those who are misdiagnosed as anxious or gifted or moody. Um, and the interesting thing is that Leo Kanner actually had access to her work. He wrote, I mean, her paper was translated in Germany and in the 20s, years and years before his own work, but he never cited her. So what does all this mean? It means that the very foundation of autism research is not just male-centered. It is deeply rooted in this misogyny, colonialism, white percent supremacy. And I'm sorry, I know that might not be the direction you're expecting to go in this lecture, and it's not going to stay there, but it's all relevant. And as an autistic woman, I am blunt, I'm direct, I'm not gentle and flowery, I'm difficult and dramatic, remember? And I'm going to talk about the things that maybe others aren't, because again, it's all relevant. The history, the roots of the tree that autism is, that we're all sprouting out of, it's, it's all coming from the same place. So why does it matter? Because as I said, early research, the diagnostic criteria, the assumptions about what autism should look like, it's all male-centric. So that's why the classic signs, the flat effect, the lining up of toys, the social withdrawal, they don't always match how autism shows up in girls. And not to mention the phenomenon of masking. Because girls, we mask it, we camouflage, we disappear in ourselves and become invisible to survive. And before I move into the masking, do you guys have any questions on that section? I know that's a
Yes.
little heavy.
Thank you so much, Zara. If you have questions, raise your hand and we'll call on you, or you can put it in the chat.
Or save them for the end if you like. It's fine. But I know sometimes we get a burning question and I have to say it right now.
Anybody? Okay, I think you're good to go.
Right. All right, masking. So one of the reasons why I think women, girls are going, I'll put the name in afterwards. So one of the reasons I think that we go undiagnosed has a lot to do with masking, right? So from a young age, autistic girls are taught and encouraged to mask. From a societal standpoint, especially in the South where I'm from, I'm in Texas right now visiting my family. It's a little later here than it is there. Um, but we're taught, you have a firm handshake and you make eye contact and you be polite and you be quiet, not too quiet. Um, you don't want to be too loud or too bold or too weird or too this or too different. You have to be a respectable young lady because you'll never get a man if you don't. That's the South for you. So we learn to blend in. Don't cause a ruckus. Never good at that. We learn to imitate our peers. We mimic. We rehearse in the mirror. We smile when we're in pain. We script conversations in our head. We repeat conversations we've already had over and over and over. It's maddening. We study facial expressions like they're algebra. We learn how to perform, right? And it works. So we sell that. And we even believe to start to believe the performance, even though a lot of us aren't aware that we're even doing it. I didn't know I was masking until I dove into this autism work. And it's mind-blowing to dissect that and see how you would have operated or performed differently in your life without that kind of like masking lens over you, right? But masking, it's not harmless, right? It's not adaptive, it's not resilience, it's exhausting. It's burnout, it's trauma, it's inauthentic. It is the fastest way to disconnect from who you are actually at the core and what you actually want in your life. And oftentimes we have these performative things, even as we get older and we're at work and we're at a work party and, we can be bubbly and effervescent and talk to everyone in the room when we go home and we're just burn out, right? It is exhausting. And it's one of the key reasons why many autistic women and girls go undiagnosed for decades or misdiagnosed with anything and everything other than autism. But this isn't just an autism issue. This is a medical history issue. Since the 1800s, women who deviated from the norm, who were too bookish, too emotional, too ambitious, just more masculine or uninterested in marriage, they were labeled with mental illness. In Victorian medicine, a woman who read novels or had independent thoughts was labeled as hysterical. The only cure in that time for hysteria was sex with your husband or marrying. So I've been married. That's not the cure. In the 1900s, women were institutionalized for melancholy and moral insanity or excessive intelligence, right? In the 1950s, if you were tired or sad or angry at your life, they gave you a Valium or a lobotomy. And today, we still hear You're too sensitive. It's just anxiety. It's probably just your hormones. So fast forward to now, 2025. Autistic women are being misdiagnosed with generalized anxiety. That's what they told me I had. Depression, ADHD, borderline personality disorder, bipolar, OCD, eating disorders, or we're just called moody or needy or emotionally unstable. She's just crazy. She's just too much. So if you're a woman and you feel things deeply, you struggle with social exhaustion, you're intelligent, you like to read, then you've been gaslit by psychiatry and you are not alone. You're not crazy. You are likely autistic and nobody bothered to ask or figure that out or help you figure it out. So, if it is so different, how so? This is where we dig into the female autism phenotype, what it actually looks like, right? So, what does it look like in women and girls? We're often precociously verbal, but might struggle to connect. I started talking at 4 months old. Um, it's not uncommon. Or if we don't speak, it's just because we choose not to. But oftentimes, these little girls are very precocious, might have intense interests that look normal, but have this like autistic level obsessions, right? Horses, celebrities, psychology, whatever. It might be perfectionist, the type A's, type A for autistic women. They might be rule followers. That wasn't me, but a lot are. People pleasers. Get straight A's, but might have panic attacks in private, right? Trying to control and maintain the environment and your work and everything that you possibly can. Might have meltdowns that look like mood swings, right? She's just angry. Again, she's just moody, right? Might be hypersensitive to sound, smell, light, textures, but are trained to hide it. I wore Doc Martens to my wedding. I never wore high heels. I didn't wear dresses because they were impractical. Didn't make sense to me. Certain fabrics, couldn't do it. Polyester, nope. Foods, really difficult. Textures, sensations, smells, mm-mm. Um, they might be exhausted a lot from pretending to be okay all the time. Might sleep in a lot because of that, right? But we're called dramatic, emotional, difficult. But what we are in that is we're overstimulated, underdiagnosed, desperate to be understood. It can feel maddening. And I'd also like to note here that if you are autistic, statistically speaking, there's an 80% chance that you also have ADHD, which has similar crossover traits, but might feel a little different. So for me, it feels like there is this war going on inside of me, like this battle between ideas and brilliance and unconventional thinking that feels like revolutionary, combined with a freeze response, with overwhelm, with this hyperactive brain that can't seem to get those thoughts out or the ideas actualized or the projects finished. It's like having all the potential in the world, but being unable to do anything with it at times. It's hard, y'all. It's hard. It's frustrating. It's depressing. Um, but when we do manage to get it out and to get it out on paper and to get our autism and our ADHD on the same page and like working together, when we do manage to do that, magic. I mean, Elon Musk and Tesla and SpaceX, right? Temple Grandin revolutionized the livestock industry. Nikola Tesla, what he did, not officially diagnosed, but pretty good sign that he is. Satoshi Tajiri created Pokemon, diagnosed autistic. Alan Turing, father of modern computing and code-breaking genius behind World War II's Enigma machine. Greta Thunberg making waves in climate change, so when we can hone it in and we can use it, like amazing things can happen. But I just wanted to note that because there is a lot of crossover there. So if you're like, well, I want to be type A, but there's something, well, there you go. That's what's going on with you. got a couple things going on, and they say if you have one form of neurodivergence, you likely have three, statistically speaking. All right, so let's break down some more of the gender differences here. Masking meltdowns, misunderstandings. So we went into masking. Girls hide their autism better than the males do. That's sad that we even have to hide it, or have even been conditioned in any way whatsoever. We copy, we perform, we blend in, we get tired. Boys are more likely to externalize their traits, withdrawal or act out. They have more observable traits, right? It's easier to see. You can't see everything that's going on in my brain at all times, and I'm not saying that you can with boys. Not everything is out here, but they tend to have more observable traits. With communication, again, girls may talk a lot, sometimes too much, but use memorized scripts or quotes from books. Or for me, it's movie quotes from the 90s. And my brain automatically, if someone says something, it like activates, it triggers a quote from like an Adam Sandler movie from the 90s when I was a kid. And then I just, sometimes we say inappropriate things because I don't necessarily have control over that. And by the time it's come out of my mouth, I'm thinking, why did you just say that out loud? That was inappropriate. That happens. Boys might talk less or avoid interaction entirely. Male special interests, we know the whole stereotype of, maybe it's not, but it's object-based special interest. Trains, numbers, planes, automobiles, object-based interests. And girls tend to have more animal or human-based interests, or nowadays I see a lot of these autistic girls and it's makeup and they're just hyper focused and they do these videos, and that's, again, they can control that, right? Um, Fantasy novels, psychology, um, eh, but it's the intensity of it. It's not just the subject matter. And that's, where we can see the autism in it. But with girls, a lot of, maybe it's a certain celebrity or again, animals. I have something that if you've been in the Saturday meetings, you've heard about me talk about the horse girl theory. And my horse girl theory is just that, is that a lot of these girls that are super focused on horses and ponies, and they might have posters all over their room, and they're, avid horse girls, and that's it. A lot of them are autistic because horses have less demand, less social demand. Um, they have, trying not to get distracted here. So they have less social demands, and they're easier to understand, easier to communicate with. So they can just show up, they can pet their horse. They don't have to know what pop culture is going on or talk about things that aren't interesting or talk at all. So it's just easier to kind of get on the same level. And as a teacher, I taught in elementary school for several years as well. And I would see the same thing, but with like, I call cat girls. And my goddaughter, I just saw her yesterday, and they wear the little cat ears and they pretend to be cats, because I think that that's less pressure than being a girl. I used to pretend to be a dog. I had a dog name, and I would act like a dog because and I would only do this whenever I was at like extended family Christmas and Thanksgivings and things like that. Because it made me feel more comfortable, because then I didn't have to actually talk to anyone. I didn't have to have a conversation. I tried to learn sign language to avoid my extended family. And when that didn't work, I just started being a dog. And I see this in school level children. And I have kids in school level children, and I see the girls in there that are clearly autistic, and a lot of them horse girls or cat ear girls in school. So autistic boys might struggle behaviorally. I see this with my own son, misunderstood, um, can't necessarily control his reactions and his physical body as well as some of the girls might. The girls might be high achievers, eager to please, but silently just kind of unraveling inside. But because they aren't a behavioral problem in the classroom, they're overlooked, right? We're going to give attention to the autistic boy because he's all over the place and he's distracting the class. So we're going to give him accommodations and the IEP and help him. But the girl who's quiet, she's fine. We don't have time. We have 30 students in a class. We're not gonna bother with her. You know, we get overlooked. Friendships can also be challenging for autistic girls and women. So we could be labeled as, you know, weird or bossy, right? A lot of autistic girls, she's so bossy. I was the bossy friend. Everything had to be in my controlled environment, my controlled way to play, right? The right way to play. There's a lot of rigidity that we talk about in autism, and I definitely can see that now looking back on my childhood. And I can't change the way that we play, right? And if I am the mom character, I'm going to be that. You don't get to be that character. And I just would snap and have a meltdown if somebody tried to change, or hey, let's mix it up. No, that doesn't work. There's a right way to do things. I'm bossy. I'm controlling this. And if you don't like it, then you can leave. So a lot of us struggle kind of in our friendships, and we might come off as maybe mean or controlling or bossy. Um, a lot of girls really, a lot of girls really struggled this. As teenagers, we might not have the same interests as other teen girls. So boys, boy bands, what? That never made sense to me. Um, the other little girls were interested in back then Backstreet Boys and NSYNC, and they wanted to talk about boys. And I'm sitting here studying philosophy and sociology and the brain and why people are the way they are and religion and these like, you know, more kind of profound things. And it was like, all right, she's a little weird. So it's harder to, as a teen, to kind of connect in that way, especially as girls grow up and um, you know, neurotypical girls might grow up and have interest in boys and, you know, a little earlier than an autistic girl might. And that can be really challenging to keep up with those friendships. I know autistic girls also who really love fantasy novels, right? Or anime. For me, I gravitated towards nonfiction because everything is about efficiency. So if I spend my time reading, then I have to gain something, some kind of knowledge or a skill out of it, or it's a waste of my time. So it's, you know, one or the other there, right? And then the boys are typically getting diagnosed earlier, as we said. 4 to 6 years old is about the average, when girls maybe not until their teen 20s, 40s, or never. One of the other things that girls tend to struggle with that the boys don't are eating disorders. So either the eating disorders as like anorexia or bulimia as a way to control the way that they look, which goes hand in hand with the OCD, because we're struggling to find control in the things that we can't because we lack control over our brains and our thoughts, right? Um, but there's an eating disorder called ARFID, avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, that a lot of autistic people, boys and girls, can struggle with. Um, but it's like a sensory eating disorder. So I don't like the smell, the taste, the texture of that. That's why there's the whole joke about like autistic foods, right? Circle back to the dino nuggets or the plain, you know, cheese pizza or chicken tenders, right? All right, so I want to get into, we know the differences now, we know the history of it. I want to get into some of the good stuff
So
because
before we do, Zara, why don't we answer a couple questions if that's okay?
Mhm.
'Cause this might
For
be a
sure.
good spot to do that. Uh,
Perfect.
so Nancy wanted to understand if the characteristics of ADHD or autism are similar. How can you tell if it's autism or both or just ADHD?
Um, I mean, like I said, there's an 80% crossover there. Um, a lot of the sensitivity stuff comes with autism and a lot of like the emotional depth. Um, Strictly ADHD, you're going to have more of the hyperactivity, and in females, it also is different than just males. So I have both. So for an ADHD, you know, male, the little boy is bouncing off the walls, right? that kid that's just all over the place and you can't get them to sit down. Um, ADHD female, it might be more internalized. So I've got a million boxes in my head and I have all these ideas and I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to start this, I want to start this project. Um, so ADHD girl might have like sections of her room with different, like I have seashells here because I'm going to build this, and I have sticks here because I'm going to do this, and it's a lot of like boxes and categories and things like that. But there, I mean, it's you have to get a real diagnosis to be able to understand if you have one or if you have both. I mean, my goddaughters, one is one and one is the other, and it is clear as day. Because the one that is strictly ADHD, she is just bold and out there and loud and brave and just will sing and dance and just does not give a shit what anyone thinks about her. And the other one, very quiet and reserved and has a lot going on, but is more contained, I'd say.
Okay, that's all the questions right now, Zara. There's one about the female psychologist, the Jewish Russian
Yeah,
psychologist.
I'll put that
People
in
on the phone,
after.
but you can do that later. Thanks so much.
Yeah. All right, the good stuff. So autism isn't just about the challenges, right? It's about our differences. Being different isn't bad. Difference is what built the world. So some of the really beautiful things that I see in autistic women and girls is we are pattern seers, right? So I think autistic males have, they're kind of known for pattern detection and things like coding and numbers. Again, look at their special interests. We talked about it. It's more tangible, physical things, um, objects, numbers, math, things like that. And we know that Google is hiring autistic people now to help with cybersecurity because they can scan and see errors or breaks in the coding. Um, but autistic women, we have pattern detection in human behavior, which I think is really fascinating, really interesting to witness. And we can see things in the most subtle ways that others might overlook, right? Just see subtle changes in an eyebrow and a this and a that and the way someone cocks their head. And we might sit there and be like scanning at all times without even being cognizant of it. Um, in just a different way than the males might. And for me, I have that, but I also have this pattern detection in scripts because I'm a screenwriter. Um, and maybe that kind of goes a little hand in hand with the coding, though I don't think I could do that the same, but I could see an error on a page. So if someone gives me a script to read, I look at the page and immediately it's just like my eye zeroes in on a misspelling or something like that. But this whole pattern detection, this pattern seeing and seeing it in humans and emotions, I think it's just so fascinating. Um, we might be creative problem solvers, right? We're not just going to look at a problem and be like, can't handle that. We're going to dig in and come up with the most interesting solutions that other people don't think about because we are looking through a completely different lens from than other people. So it's not just how we perceive the world, but it's how do we perceive problems and solutions. And that's pretty cool to witness, especially in like if you work in a creative field. Um, I mean, we're artists and writers and tend to lean towards, the literature aspect and you know, um, and that inventors, just creators, and people like Emily Dickinson, I believe, was autistic. Recluse, brilliant writer. She had a special tree, unmarried, right? We tend to feel really deeply. And there is this misconception that autistic people lack empathy. And that is the farthest from the truth that out of everything they say about autism, that we lack empathy is the farthest thing from the truth out of everything that they say. We feel so much. Again, we're hypersensitive creatures, right? Not just to smells and lights and sounds, and it's too bright and I need sunglasses inside. but everything. We feel so much. We're empaths. We feel what other people are feeling. We feel their pain. But because we don't express it in the same way, we might be perceived as lacking empathy. But that's not the case. We feel so deeply. Um, but I just might not have the same emotional response outwardly that someone else has. Even though that same thing, somebody next to me, neurotypical, could just cry and, oh my God, look at this kid that got hit by a car, whatever it is. I might not have that same reaction, but I'm sitting there and I'm marinating it and I'm replaying that story and the imagery over and over for months, years, the rest of my life, right? We just feel so much. Um, and with that, there's also RSD, rejection sensitivity dysphoria. So we feel and experience rejection, whew, 10 times harder than a neurotypical person might. Whether it's a rejection from somebody that we love or that we're interested in, or in the workplace, or for me, it can be as simple as someone giving harsh notes on a script that I wrote, and it's just like, oh. But remember, I'm just difficult and dramatic, right? There you go. We tend to be wildly loyal. Oh, we're so loyal. I always tell men, I said, if you get an autistic woman, if you fall in love with an autistic woman, you are so lucky because they are so loyal and loving and would just do anything for you. Authentic, loyal to a fault. Circle back around to that whole obsession thing, right? Obsessed in the best way. But we are down, ride or die. We don't necessarily do small talk. No, we don't do fake. We don't do shallow. We are deep. I mean, I always joke if I'm going on a date or something, it's like, all right, well, we're just going to dive into the depths of your soul and the universe and your purpose and your function here real quick. Don't really care what your favorite color is or where you grew up. Surface level, not interested. Like we're going deeper. I'm going home. And I see that in a lot of these other autistic women that I talk to. Um, but overall, I mean, we're not broken. We're just built so deeply, right? Our nervous systems weren't necessarily made to function in this world that wasn't created with us in mind. We were made to remake it, to rebuild it in a way that kind of serves and is inclusive to all, I'd say. Um, so from there, I want to go into some survival tools, right? Talked about some of the challenges, talked about some of the good stuff. Um, Sometimes the challenging side overpowers the superpower, right? I'm feeling good about myself here and now maybe I'm not. What do we do? All right. Sensory regulation. So that's one thing that happens. It's too bright, it's too this, it's too loud. I went to a concert, there's too many people, I'm struggling. What can we do? Okay, well, we know that you can put on headphones or something like that. Um, I always like to wear rose-tinted glasses in public. Before I ever had an autism diagnosis, I would wear these, and suddenly it made me feel invisible. And I would always be shocked when someone would, "Hey, Zara," and I'm like, "How can you tell it's me?" I thought I was invisible here. But I realized it's a security blanket and it's a sensory regulation. Now I'm filtering out some, not only light, but I feel like in my own head, at least, I'm filtering out people and filtering out their energy. And I'm just like, okay, I can blend in, I can breathe right now. Um, I also really struggle with fabrics, right? I like tight clothes. I don't like real loose clothes. I like tight clothes because it's like the compression, right? It's kind of like the weighted blanket. And I know we're all a little different there. Some like really loose clothes. They don't like to feel constricted. But it's the fabrics that I found. And when we see a child, I always tell this to the parents, and they're like, my kid, they're having a meltdown, and I don't understand why. And I'm looking at them, and I'm like, well, look at the fabric of that dress that they're wearing. I wouldn't want to wear that. Look, the left sock is falling into their shoe. That has to be really uncomfortable. The shoes are too tight. oh, this person you keep trying to hold their hand. They don't want that. So it's, finding ways to regulate, creating a sanctuary that works for your brain. So for me, sunglasses, or I like to wear like hoodies because I just feel safe and contained, right? I also have something I call my goddess lounge, and essentially it's just like an indoor tent that I have with all kinds of pillows and fabrics. And it is just a safe, contained space that when I am feeling overwhelmed, I go in there and I can have my sounds and, my smells and whatever I need. Um, and then another tool would be burnout recovery, because this is real. I am so sick of people calling autistic people like, okay, well, you're just lazy. Why is she in bed until noon? Why we're burnt out. Um, so it's like you're not lazy, and you're running on like depleted neural batteries, right? So we have to allow ourselves to rest. We have to allow ourselves to say no, no. Um, I'm working on a script right now that is exhausting and it's taking up all my time. And I'm so overwhelmed that I've told all my friends um, for the last month, I can't talk to you until the first week in August. So schedule your phone calls then. But saying no is hard because I like to be there for people. There goes the empathetic response, the empathy. I want to help everyone at all times and do everything that everyone asks of me. And at the end of the day, we just can't, because then we go in the burnout cycle, and that's just no way to live. You don't have to do that. You don't have to be a people pleaser. You don't have to please everybody. Rest, say no, lower the bar. It's okay. Just let yourself collapse and rest. And burnout can last for, it's not just hours or days, it can last for weeks or months sometimes. So you have to give yourself some grace, and like, it's okay, the world will go on, right? I always joke about being a mother though, because that's a little more challenging. I would always say, like, I didn't have the luxury of having a burnout. I didn't have the luxury of having a meltdown today because I'm a mom. Um, but that's unacceptable because we can't pour from an empty cup, right? Unmasking, identity reclamation, take the mask off slowly. Ask yourself, what do you actually like? Who do you actually want to spend your time with? Because I said earlier, we're deeply loyal. But part of that, again, is learning to say no and to detach from people who actually don't bring you joy, people that aren't good for you, some friends, some relationships that might just be too, it's not good for your mental health. So again, we have to start asking ourselves the question, what do you actually want? Who do you actually want to spend your time with? What do you actually want to do? Right? Ask that, ask yourself questions and lean into that. And with that, find your flock, find your other rare birds. Whether it's, online, a social group, you guys have this group, which is amazing, in real life. What I've come to discover is that we are not these solitude aliens alone on this planet, dropped here, and there's no one else out of 8 billion people like us. No, there's not. There's actually a lot of people like us. You just have to find your people, find your tribe, find your flock. Um, you're not alone. And then we have to reframe the narrative, not just for ourselves, for other people as well, right? You're not failing at being normal. You're succeeding at being yourself. You're allowing yourself to be yourself in a world that they need to adjust, not you, right? We're not going to make ourselves small for other people. We're not going to do that anymore. We're not going to tone down and be less of anything other than who we are. Because what's the point? No, no, thank you. We're not doing that anymore. So, in closing, what happens when the girl who no one saw for who she is finally sees herself? What happens when she finally comes to terms with who she is, learns to accommodate her needs, right? Learns to see what those are. She stops hiding, she stops apologizing, she stops shrinking, and she starts building a life that fits her. Not one that demands she shapeshift to fit into, or that she mask to fit into, or, you know, we're not here to make everyone else comfortable. We're just not, you know. You're not too sensitive, you're not too much, you're not broken. You are a rare bird, and rare birds do not belong in cages. We are meant to fly. So with this conversation, with this understanding, if you yourself are an autistic female, I hope you figured this out. I hope you embrace this, embrace yourself, and you don't shrink. And if you are an ally or a friend or a family member to one, then I hope that you show um, that rare bird in your life the same kind of grace and love and understanding that you would want for yourself. And that's all I got. So any questions you
Thank
guys
you. Thanks,
see?
Zara. So let's see,
Find the name real quick.
okay, well, why don't we do a more, yes, the session is being recorded, so you got that one. I got that one. So Nancy wants to know, how did your family and friends support you the best as an autistic woman?
Um, I'd say before I was diagnosed, and my parents had no idea growing up in the 90s, they gave me a lot of freedom just to be my kooky, eccentric, out there self. And I mean, for sensory reasons, I didn't wear shoes until I was an adult. And they just really kind of embraced me and let me go off and do my own thing. Um, I will say it was whenever I got my diagnosis, it was a little more challenging for um, my mom is sneaking in the room right now, right as I'm about to talk about her. I think it was challenging for my parents to accept that I was autistic though, because um, as a parent, you don't want to feel like anything is your fault. And because of the stigma around autism, that we're now breaking through this in beautiful ways. But before that, it would be like, oh my God, my child is autistic, and it was viewed again because of, societally and film and media and all of this film in that way. Um, but now, I mean, just like when I was a kid, I think that they really embraced me and, you know, and as I'm studying this, I can see a lot in my own family because we know that it's primarily genetic. But yeah, and then the friends are all like, "Well, duh, of course. We've always known you were your own thing. Now we just have a label for it. Cool." So, and anyone who didn't accept it later.
I'm sorry, I have a question. So you've been doing some research. You want to share what area of research you're working on,
Um,
or can you?
yeah, well, the research that I've been doing is primarily all on the female autism phenotype and how it presents differently in us. Um, but I am doing a project with Simon Baron Cohen and Cambridge University right now. I started my own production company a couple years ago, and I had worked with him on the documentary that I did. And so he came back to me and my producing partner Victoria, who through the film ended up getting her own diagnosis, which is pretty cool. But we are working on a project, and it's called 50 Faces of Autism. I don't know if anyone here, I can't see all the names we interviewed for it, but we interviewed 50 different people all around LA. Some people flew in town. And the function of that is to broaden the way that autism is viewed and diagnosed worldwide. So they're then going to take the film and distribute it to different doctors and psychs around the world. And there's like a quiz that goes with it. And again, the whole function is to steer away from the white male centric diagnosis. So that's one of the things I'm working on right now.
Thank you. Other questions for Zara? There was somebody who wanted to have you restate the statistics regarding autism and ADHD.
80% of people with autism also have ADHD.
And is that people or just women?
People. Another statistic, and I normally like to talk about this because there's huge crossovers between gender and sexual non-conforming people and autism. So transgender people are 3 to 6 times more likely to be autistic. 30% of transgender people are autistic that we know of so far. Um, and I just feel like that's important to talk about because there's huge crossovers. I know so many non-binary female-born, non-binary autistic people because it just doesn't make sense. And, the functionality of gender at that point, they're trying to wrap their heads around, and that's where, and they get confused and they're like, well, that just doesn't make sense to me. So it's a fun statistic.
So Zara, there's a question from Abigail. I do want to ask, maybe it's a bit personal on the note for be careful when spending time with people. Uh-oh. Can you read the rest? Because I lost
Some
the
people, I
screen.
can tell that they're silently judging me for not dating or ever being in a relationship. Personally, I don't see the need. Give that you're a mom, maybe you can give some insight on this. Guess what? Huge amounts of autistic people are either asexual or
Hold
they just
on.
don't care. They just don't need that.
Yeah,
Um,
I got a lot going on right now.
Yeah, even if it's not just like you have stuff going on, it's like what's the need and what's the function of this? I have another theory I talk about, and it's called the spinster and the cat lady. And I think all of those stereotypes are, I think those are autistic women. Oh my God, she lives alone in a cottage in the forest with her plants and her cats. That sounds amazing. I think that's an autistic woman, right? Oh, the spinster, she's 60 years old, she never married, she lives by herself or with her friends and, has her own thing going on. Cool, autistic woman. At the end of the day,
How about the witches of Salem?
um, I studied this pretty intensely actually. They were neurodivergent. There was, gosh, I can't remember the details. It's been so long since I unveiled this, but there's there was some kind of oh, I'm gonna mess it up, but I found proof basically that they were neurodivergent, and so a lot of like the delusions and the night tremors and the screaming out, it had to do with some neurological thing that was happening to them, which we were later able to prove. So, yeah.
Uh, in one of the women's discussions, you talked about neurodivergent women in television and how they weren't necessarily labeled, but you could spot the characters. I thought
Yep.
that was a fun discussion. You might want to revisit it a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. So I think there's I mean, we have a huge job if you're a filmmaker, director, a writer. We have a huge job to accurately portray people. And when we look at film and television, we see how autism is portrayed. It's again, it's Rain Man, it's the good doctor, it's these young white male savant, medical genius, math genius. And that is not, 1% of the population are savants, and not all savants are even autistic, but um, female autism is never labeled up until recently. There's like two shows I can think of. Up until recently, it's never labeled. But what they do is they sample characteristics of the autistic woman because we're interesting, right? The manic pixie dream girl. We see it in Sunshine, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. We see it in the Ramona character from Scott Pilgrim Saves the World. We see it in these different movies, and it's normally a female. They always show her with different colored hair. And her whole function is she's so interesting and fascinating, and she takes our male protagonist and she shows him a different way of life, and she leads him to his destiny. So all that is they're sampling the interesting parts of autism in females, and they're not labeling it because then they don't have to be responsible for accuracy. My favorite autistic character on television right now, and she's not labeled as such, but it's Wednesday Addams. Morbid, special interest. She actually has a lot of male traits though. And I know they didn't intend that, but you know, I think she's fascinating. But it's just interesting. We're all over film and television. They're just using us like a sampler platter. But Wednesday and her roommate, autism and ADHD. What other autistic neurodivergent people are famous? Holly Madison, she was on Girls Next Door, one of Hugh Hefner's, I don't know if she came out as autistic recently, and I thought that was interesting. Because one of the things I didn't talk about in this was some of the abuse that can come with being autistic and being taken advantage of. And I love that she got diagnosed, even though it was recently, because she talks about being taken advantage of by Hugh Hefner and being brought into that world, and it's because she's autistic. So something to think about.
Somebody wanted to know, do most autistic girls know they are masking, and how do you move away from that so she can be her true self?
No, I don't think so. I don't think we're cognizant of masking until we're an adult and we're like, whoa, that's what I was doing. Um, my goddaughter, best friend of 35 years, her daughter just got diagnosed. And I've been telling her for a while. Her daughter's 8. And even with that, mom, my best friend, she's trying so hard to be very aware and very delicate with it. But the mom is strictly ADHD and is a little more abrasive with it. And I see this little girl and I see her masking because mom is like, okay, all right, be quiet. You don't have a good, don't sing, don't, and I see her doing it as a survival technique. So I think it's more of that. It's a survival tactic for these young girls more than it's something that they're aware that they're doing. It's like, okay, if I want to fit in, if I want to have friends, I have to do this. My goddaughter she is the opposite of me. So we see the don't touch me, I don't like to be hugged, I don't like affection. That was me growing up. And on the other end for autistic females, it's the overly affectionate, inappropriate. Let me sit on your lap, you're a stranger, let me hug a stranger, and she's like that. So we've had to kind of talk in that regard. It's kind of like, girl, you got a mask because what you're doing is dangerous and it's going to put you in a dangerous situation. So I don't know, something to think about.
So there's a question about the 50 Faces of Autism. Is that going to be out as something people can watch, or is that going to be limited to just, a research engine that?
We don't know yet. That's up to Cambridge.
Okay.
I think Simon is pretty excited about this because he's just, he's not savvy to social media or anything like that. And we've been talking to him about what could happen if we even got him on TikTok, if we started like putting pieces of this puzzle out, and how many other people could we help? So I think eventually it might be.
And is it done? Is it wrapped up and sent to him now, or are you still filming?
We have our very last draft that we're sending him this week, but yeah.
When you're busy. Well, thank you so much, Zhara. Thank you everybody for coming. Zhara is with us once a quarter. She leads the women's discussion group. There's room for more of you there. It's a really good opportunity to share and get feedback and hear from other people. So Zhara, thank you for being you and for your interest in this area and your help of other people exploring what it's like to be a woman on the spectrum.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you guys for having me. It's late here. I gotta go to bed.
All right. Let's
Thank
let
you so
Zhara
much.
get to sleep. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you
Bye.
guys.
You.